You are not going anywhere. Let go of me. You're hurting me. Stop resisting. You need to listen to me right now. No, you listen. I have been waiting here for 3 hours. This gate is closed. There's nothing I can do. You're being completely unreasonable. Come. You can't just do that. You're not getting on. No! Watch me, you entitled bitch!
Take off your hood. You look like you snuck in here. That was the first thing Deborah Whitfield said to her, loud enough for the entire Concourse F lounge at Hartsfield-Jackson to hear. Not a question, an order. The kind of order you give to someone you have already decided does not deserve an answer back. Before we get to that moment, let's go back 4 hours, to a woman most people in this story had no idea they were looking at. The air inside Hartsfield-Jackson smelled the way it always does at 10 at night. Burnt coffee, hot pretzels, the faint rubber tang of 1,000 rolling suitcases. Nia Ashworth stood near a charging station with a battered navy backpack at her feet, wearing a gray Spelman College hoodie gone soft at the seams, dark denim, and white sneakers that had clearly walked more miles than they had left in them. Her braids were pulled back under a plain black cap. At 29, Nia was the founder and sole owner of Meridian Freight Intelligence, a logistics AI company that had, over 6 quiet years, become the invisible backbone moving cargo through 11 of the busiest ports in North America. Her personal fortune had crossed 11 figures the previous spring, a number she genuinely did not keep in her head because it had never once told her who she was. She was flying to Charlotte to see her grandmother, Miss Odessa Ashworth, 78 years old, dark-skinned, sharp-eyed, and the only person on this earth Nia still called ma'am. Odessa had raised her in a 2-bedroom house in East Point after Nia's mother passed, working 31 years as a hotel housekeeper, and every single one of those years she had been talked down to by guests who assumed the woman folding their towels had nothing more to offer the world. Nia remembered being 11 years old, sitting in a hotel break room doing homework, watching her grandmother get handed a room service tray like she was invisible furniture that happened to have hands. She never forgot the particular quiet her grandmother wore afterward. Not anger, something heavier. A woman deciding again not to let it land. Nia built Meridian in part so that no algorithm of hers would ever again let a person be treated as invisible in a system meant to serve them. It was a strange debt to pay with software, but it was the only currency she had that could reach far enough. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Her assistant had scrambled a same-day ticket after Nia decided, on a whim rare for her, to surprise Odessa for her birthday instead of sending the usual overnight flowers. The only seat left on the direct flight was 2A, first class, a seat Nia had not asked for and did not need. She would have been just as content in seat 34C, but her assistant panicked, and Nia, exhausted from 3 back-to-back board calls, had not argued. She checked her phone at the gate. 41 unread messages, and 1 text she actually cared about from her CFO, Marcus Reyes. Nia confirmed. The Falcon Terminal acquisition closed at 6:12 p.m. Ridgeline Capital's full portfolio is folded into Meridian effective tonight. She allowed herself a small smile, the kind she rarely let anyone see. Ridgeline Capital was an old money asset management firm out of Buckhead, stiff-collared and slow-moving, but it quietly managed almost $400 billion in corporate holdings across the Southeast. As of tonight, all of it answered eventually to her. A second text landed. Also, heads up, Ridgeline is the sole holder of Coastal Skyway's senior credit facility. $640 million. We inherited it in the deal. Recommend a call Monday on terms. Nia typed back a single word, noted, and put the phone face down on her knee. She had exactly one plan for tonight, and it did not involve Coastal Skyways or its credit facility. It involved getting to Charlotte, knocking on her grandmother's door, and watching Odessa's face when she opened it. She had no idea how close those two things were about to collide. Nia was, by nature, a quiet woman. She did not fill silence for other people's comfort. She had learned, in boardrooms full of men twice her age who assumed the youngest person in the room was there to take notes, that saying less and listening more was its own kind of leverage. She treated the man who cleaned the Meridian offices with the exact same attention she gave her board chair, because her grandmother had taught her, without ever saying it in so many words, That dignity was not a reward you handed out. It was a baseline. You did not get to take it away from someone because their hoodie was faded. She sat down at gate F9, pulled her backpack, the same one she had carried since business school, the leather worn pale at the corners, into her lap and closed her eyes. She had 4 hours until she'd be standing on Odessa's porch. She just needed 45 quiet minutes first. She was not going to get them. 2 gates down, near the priority boarding line, Deborah Whitfield was already watching her. Deborah was 53, blonde hair sprayed into a shape that did not move, and 22 years into her career as a coastal skyways flight attendant, the last 9 of them as a lead purser, the position she introduced herself with before she introduced herself with her name. She considered the first-class cabin hers the way some people consider their living room theirs. Guests were welcome, guests behaved. And Deborah had a very specific, very rehearsed idea of what a first-class guest looked like, an idea she had never once had to examine, because for 22 years nobody had made her. She watched Nia settle into the gate area in her hoodie and sneakers, backpack against her shins, and something in her chest tightened the way it always did when the picture in front of her didn't match the picture in her head. She walked over to the gate agent's podium, a young man named Tyler Combs, and leaned in. "Who's that in the hoodie?" By the charging station, Tyler glanced at his screen. Ashworth, N Seat 2A, full fare first class. Deborah's mouth pulled into a thin line. "That can't be right. Ticket's clean, Ms. Whitfield." "Run it again," she said, already walking away before he could answer, because she had stopped needing an answer the moment she decided what the answer would be. This is the part where you should notice something. Nia's backpack was scuffed at the corners in a very particular way. The kind of wear that comes from being carried through years of long nights, not the kind that comes from being bought pre-distressed at a mall. Keep that backpack in mind. It matters more than it looks like it does right now. 20 minutes later, boarding for the flight to Charlotte hadn't even started, and Deborah Whitfield was already standing over Nia's chair, arms crossed, her coastal skyways wings catching the fluorescent light like a small, cold badge. "Ma'am," her voice had the particular sweetness people use right before they say something ugly. "This area's reserved for our platinum members." Main cabin seating's back that way. Nia opened her eyes slowly. She did not startle. She had learned a long time ago that startling was a gift you gave people who wanted to see you rattled, and she had stopped handing out that gift for free. "I have a first-class ticket," she said. "Seat 2A." She held up her phone, boarding pass glowing on the screen, and did not offer anything more. Deborah's eyes flicked to the phone and away from it, the way you look at something you've already decided not to believe. "Passes get mixed up all the time, sweetheart. Gate agents make mistakes." A pause, timed for maximum condescension. "I'd hate for you to be embarrassed getting pulled off the jet bridge in front of everybody." Around them, the gate area had gone quiet in that specific way. A room goes quiet when it senses a fight starting and doesn't want to miss it. A man in a rumpled suit lowered his phone call to a murmur. A mother pulled her son half a step closer to her side, out of instinct more than danger. "I'm not embarrassed," Nia said. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "I'm in my seat." "I'm the lead purser on this flight," Deborah said, drawing the title up around herself like a coat. "It's my job to make sure the cabin is comfortable for everyone. I think you'd be a lot more comfortable back with the rest of the—" She caught herself, chose a different word, and the pause before she chose it told everyone listening exactly what the first word would have been with the general boarding group. Nia stood up, not fast, not aggressive. She simply rose to her full height, slung the worn backpack over one shoulder, and looked at Deborah Whitfield the way you look at weather, something to be noted, not negotiated with. "I paid for seat 2A, she said quietly. "I intend to sit in it." She walked past her toward the podium, and Deborah's face went the color of old brick. That was Tier 1, a private enough humiliation that, if it had stopped there, a tired traveler might have written it off as one bad employee on one bad night. It did not stop there. Nothing that starts with someone deciding they already know who you are ever stops at Tier 1. Deborah followed her to the podium, heels striking the tile like she was trying to punish the floor for existing. "Tyler," she said, loud enough now that half the gate could hear it, "run her ticket again. Something's not right." Tyler scanned the boarding pass a second time. It came back exactly the way it had the first time: green, clean, seat 2A, full fare. paid through a corporate card under Meridian Freight Intelligence. He looked up at Deborah, visibly uncomfortable, a 24-year-old caught between a woman with 22 years of seniority and a customer who had done absolutely nothing wrong. It's valid, Ms. Whitfield, same as before. Then flag it for a manual gate check, Deborah snapped. I want eyes on that bag before it goes anywhere near my cabin. This is the moment you should feel your stomach tighten, because you already know Deborah is not talking about airline policy anymore. She is talking about a feeling, and she is about to spend the next 20 minutes trying to turn that feeling into a rule in front of 100 strangers, because somewhere in her mind, being wrong about Nia Ashworth was less acceptable than making Nia Ashworth's night miserable. Boarding began. First class and priority passengers filed toward the jet bridge in a loose, well-dressed line. Nia stood near the back of it, backpack against her hip, jaw tight but face perfectly still, the specific stillness of someone choosing, on purpose, not to give a room what it's hungry for. A man in a lime green blazer near the front of the line had his phone out, filming sideways, grinning like he'd stumbled onto free entertainment. His name, for the record, was Kyle Bannerman, and he worked in wealth management at a firm 3 floors up from Nia's own building in Buckhead, though neither of them knew that yet. "Ma'am, step aside, please," Deborah said when Nia reached the scanner, physically inserting herself between Nia and the jet bridge door. "We need to verify your bag meets carry-on dimensions." The backpack in question was half empty. It would have fit in the overhead bin of a regional jet with room to spare. Nia set it on the gate-sizing frame without a word. It slid in with inches on every side. "It fits," she said. "That doesn't mean it's approved," Deborah said, and reached out and physically pulled the bag back out of the frame by the strap. There it is, that is the frozen moment. For 3 full seconds, nobody in that boarding line moved. Tyler's hand hovered over his keyboard. Kyle's phone kept recording. The mother with the small son went very still, the way people go still when they realize they might be about to watch something they'll remember for a long time. Even the overhead announcement system, mid-boarding call, seemed to pause in the wrong place. Nia looked down at Deborah's hand on the strap of the bag her grandmother had helped her buy with hotel tip money the week she got into business school, and something in her face did not soften and did not harden. It simply closed, like a door being latched, quiet and final. "Take your hand off my bag," Nia said, 6 words. No volume behind them at all. Somehow they landed louder than anything Deborah had said all night. Deborah let go not because she'd been asked, she would insist later, but because, in her own words, I didn't want to touch anything that might have something on it. The sentence would end her career less than an hour later, but she did not know that yet either. "You people," Deborah muttered, and then, realizing she'd said it out loud, tried to cover it with volume. This is exactly the kind of attitude that gets flights delayed. I am trying to keep this cabin safe, and I am being met with hostility. "I have said 4 sentences to you," Nia replied, "and none of them were hostile. You are the one who put your hands on my property." That was Tier 2, no longer private, no longer deniable, performed now for an entire boarding line with at least 1 camera running. And it still was not the worst of it. "Fine," Deborah said, straightening her uniform jacket with a sharp tug, chin lifted like a woman who had just decided to escalate a losing hand rather than fold it. "You want to stand here and argue with me in front of everyone, that's your choice. But I am not letting an unverified passenger board my aircraft." "Tyler, hold the gate. I need a supervisor down here." "There is nothing to verify," Tyler said, and for a moment it looked like he might actually hold his ground. "Her ticket's clean, Ms. Whitfield. I've scanned it twice." "Then scan it a 3rd time," Deborah snapped, "because something about this does not sit right with me." Somewhere in that sentence, "something about this does not sit right with me," was the whole shape of the evening. Not a policy, not a rule. A feeling, dressed up in a uniform, given the power to hold 180 people on the ground. Nia stood at the edge of the jet bridge, backpack now clutched instead of slung, and let the silence stretch. She was doing the math on how long she could let this play out before she simply called her own pilot and skipped the entire circus. She had a Gulfstream sitting in a hangar not 40 minutes away that she almost never used because she had always liked, the ordinary chaos of a public terminal, the reminder of where she came from. Tonight, that preference was being tested in a way it had never been tested before. She could leave. She had every right to leave, to walk away from this gate and never look back, and no one watching would have blamed her. But leaving felt tonight like exactly what Deborah Whitfield wanted. And Nia Ashworth had spent her whole life refusing to hand people what they wanted just because they'd made things difficult. "I'll wait," she said simply. "Call whoever you need to call." She did not know it yet, but she was about to become the reason Deborah Whitfield's entire career ended in under 90 minutes, and the reason Coastal Skyways would spend the next 3 years rebuilding itself from the studs up. The gate supervisor arrived 4 minutes later. His name was Andre Poole, mid-40s, dark-skinned, sharp in his gray Coastal Skyways blazer, with the tired eyes of a man who had spent 2 decades cleaning up messes made by people with less patience than he had. He looked at the boarding pass on Tyler's screen, looked at Deborah, looked at Nia standing quietly at the edge of the jet bridge, and understood the entire situation in about 4 seconds, because he had seen this exact situation, with different names attached, more times than he wanted to count. "Ms. Whitfield, the ticket's valid," he said, keeping his voice even. "Full fare, seat 2A, no flags in the system." "I don't care what the system says," Deborah said, and this was the sentence. "I don't care what the system says," that Andre would repeat word for word in his statement 40 minutes later. "I have a bad feeling about her, Andre. 22 years, I know how to read people. Something is off." "What's off," Andre said quietly, "is that you pulled a bag out of an approved sizing frame in front of 40 witnesses." Deborah's face flushed. She had not expected pushback from someone who, in her mind, ought to have backed her without question. "Are you seriously taking her side over mine?" "I'm not taking sides," Andre said. "I'm reading a ticket." It was Tier 3 that finally broke the standoff, and it did not come from Andre. It came from Deborah herself, in a decision so small and so enormous that it would end everything she had spent 22 years building. "Fine," she said, turning to Nia with something close to triumph flickering behind her eyes, as though she had finally found the move that would win. "If Andre won't do his job, I will. Ma'am, I am formally reporting you as a non-compliant passenger. You assaulted a crew member when you grabbed that bag out of my hands, and I am not flying with someone I don't feel safe around." The lie landed in the air like a dropped glass. Nia had not grabbed anything. Deborah had grabbed the bag. Everyone standing in that boarding line had just watched it happen the other way around, and for one long, awful second, nobody said a word. This is the moral fracture point of the whole story, the moment where an entire line of strangers had to decide, silently, whether they were going to say something or let a lie stand because saying something felt like more trouble than it was worth. Most of them chose silence, and it is worth sitting with why, because it is not really about cowardice. The mother with the small son thought about her connecting flight and her son's bedtime and told herself someone else would speak up. Kyle Bannerman, still filming, thought about the video going viral more than he thought about the woman being falsely accused in front of him. He wanted the drama, not the justice. A retired schoolteacher named Louise Marsh, 71 years old, silver-haired, standing 3 people back in line, opened her mouth once, closed it, opened it again, and this time she didn't close it. "That's not what happened," Louise said, her voice thin but steady, cutting through the murmur of the gate. "I was standing right here." She grabbed the bag out of the young lady's hands. Nobody touched her. It was a small thing. Louise had no power in that terminal, no title, no authority Deborah was obligated to respect. But she said it anyway, into a silence that had already decided to look away, and something about an old woman's steady voice made 3 other people find theirs too. "She's right," a man in a business suit added. "I saw the whole thing." Tyler, visibly relieved to have cover, finally said what he'd wanted to say for the last 10 minutes. "The passenger did not touch Ms. Whitfield. I had a direct line of sight." Deborah's face went through several colors in rapid succession. "This is, you are all, I know what I felt happen to me." "You felt something happen," Andre said quietly, "that the entire gate just told me didn't happen." Andre pulled his radio to his mouth and called it in not a security threat, but a formal incident report, the kind that goes up the chain whether anyone wants it to or not. And it was at that exact moment, with Deborah Whitfield still insisting, red-faced, that she'd been assaulted by a woman who had never once raised her voice, that the second layer of the story began to surface. Not through Nia saying a single word about who she was, because she still hadn't and wouldn't. It came through a document. A Coastal Skyways regional manager named Priscilla Odom, 46, blonde, brisk, had been paged down from the airline's Atlanta operations office the moment incident, Gate F9, first-class passenger hit the internal system. She arrived with a tablet in hand, scanning the passenger manifest as she walked, and stopped cold 3 feet from the gate. "Ma'am," she said, looking directly at Nia for the first time, her voice suddenly, noticeably different from every voice that had spoken to Nia that night, careful, almost formal. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. Is there anything I can get you while we sort this out?" The shift in tone was so abrupt that Deborah actually laughed, a short, disbelieving bark. "Priscilla, don't tell me you're falling for this too. Look at her." Priscilla did not look at Nia's hoodie. She was looking at her tablet screen, where the corporate billing account attached to the ticket had just resolved into a name that made her stomach drop: Meridian Freight Intelligence. The company whose predictive routing software Coastal Skyways' own cargo division had spent 11 months and $4 million trying and failing to license a partnership with, because Meridian didn't do partnerships with airlines that couldn't get their basic operations right. "Ms. Whitfield," Priscilla said carefully, "can I speak with you privately for a moment?" "No," Deborah said, arms crossed, entirely unwilling to back down even now, even in front of her own regional manager. "I stand by what I said." She was aggressive, she was uncooperative, and frankly her whole attitude tonight has been. "Karen," Priscilla said, using Deborah's actual middle name, the one crew used when things had gone past professional. "The woman you have spent the last 25 minutes accusing of assault owns 40% of the company we've been trying to sign a logistics contract with for a year. I need you to stop talking, right now." The silence that followed was the second frozen moment of the night, and it was the loudest one. Kyle Bannerman lowered his phone, mouth open. The mother with the small son actually gasped, softly, the sound slipping out before she could stop it. Tyler stared at his screen like it might explain how he'd missed this. And Deborah Whitfield, Deborah, who had built 22 years of authority on the certainty that she could read a person's worth by the fabric of their hoodie, stood absolutely still, the way a building stands still in the half-second after the foundation gives out, right before anyone can see it's already falling. That can't be," Deborah started. "It's confirmed," Priscilla said quietly, not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. "Corporate legal is already on the phone." Nia had still not said a word about who she was. She had not needed to. That is the whole shape of what dignity actually looks like when it's real. It does not announce itself. It simply waits to be seen, and it does not owe anyone the performance of proving it. "Ms. Ashworth," Priscilla said, turning to her, "I am deeply sorry for what just happened. You are welcome to board immediately, first priority, and I will personally—" "I'm not getting on this flight," Nia said. Her voice was calm, but something in it had gone very final, not with her working it. She nodded just once toward Deborah. "And not tonight, period." She pulled out her phone. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to raise her voice. She simply dialed a number, put the phone to her ear, and said 4 words that would end up costing Coastal Skyways more than anyone standing at that gate could yet imagine. "Marcus, freeze the facility." On the other end, Marcus Reyes, 3 time zones away in a home office in Buckhead, sat up straight. "The Coastal Skyways credit line. Nia, that's $640 million in active facility. If we freeze it before market open Monday, that triggers." "I know what it triggers," Nia said. "Freeze it tonight. I'll send the authorization in writing in 10 minutes. She hung up. She slid her phone back into her pocket. And she stood at gate F9 of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, in a faded Spelman hoodie and sneakers with 11,000 miles on them, having just quietly detonated a financial device that would not fully go off until the following Monday morning, when Coastal Skyways Treasury Department discovered, with growing horror, that the credit facility covering payroll, fuel contracts, and landing fee obligations for 4 regional hubs had been frozen at the source, effective immediately, by the new controlling entity of Ridgeline Capital. Notice what did not happen. Nia did not shout. She did not demand an apology in front of the crowd. She did not even raise her voice above a normal speaking volume the entire time. The devastation that was coming for coastal skyways over the next 72 hours would arrive entirely because of what she chose not to do in that moment. She chose not to perform anger for an audience that, until 4 minutes earlier, had refused to see her as anything but suspicious. Deborah Whitfield, to her credit or her ruin, history would eventually decide, which still did not apologize. Even standing in the wreckage of her own accusation, even with Priscilla Odom's hand literally raised in a gesture telling her to stop talking, she found one more sentence. "I still think," she said, quieter now but no less certain, that a first-class cabin should feel a certain way. That's not prejudice. That's standards. It was that sentence, more than the shove, more than the false accusation, more than any single thing that happened at Gate F9 that night, that ended her career. Because it was recorded on Kyle Bannerman's phone in perfect audio, exactly 41 seconds before Andre Poole formally relieved her of duty pending investigation and asked her to surrender her wings. The following Monday, Coastal Skyways stock opened down 11% before trading was voluntarily paused. By Tuesday, the CEO, a heavyset man named Gerald Hutton who had built his entire public image around folksy Southern hospitality, was on a call with Nia Ashworth's legal team, his voice stripped of every ounce of the charm he'd built his career on. "Ms. Ashworth," he said, "I want to start by saying how deeply, deeply sorry the entire company is." "I'm sure you are," Nia said. "Now that it's costing you $640 million. Hutton was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from us to make this right?" Nia had spent the weekend at her grandmother's kitchen table in Charlotte, finally delivering the birthday surprise a day late, watching Odessa's face crumple into tears when she opened the door and found her granddaughter standing there instead of a flower delivery. Odessa had listened to the whole story over sweet tea, shaking her head slowly, and said only one thing that mattered: "Baby, don't make this about you winning. Make it about the next woman who walks through that airport not having to prove she belongs." So when Nia finally answered Gerald Hutton, her terms were not built for revenge. They were built to last. "First," she said, "the credit facility stays frozen through Wednesday, not because I need the leverage anymore, but because your board needs to feel, in real numbers, what your culture cost you. Then we restructure at 4 points above what you were paying, effective immediately for the next 5 years. Hutton exhaled audibly. "That's understood. Second, you will establish publicly the Odessa Ashworth Fellowship, full-ride aviation and business scholarships for Black women from working-class backgrounds in the Atlanta metro area, funded at $15 million over 5 years, administered independently, not by your PR department. Done. Third, and this one is not negotiable. Every single Coastal Skyways employee, from gate agents to your executive leadership team, goes through a mandatory bias and de-escalation training program built and delivered by Meridian's People Division. 2 years minimum. You will pay full market rate for it and you will not water it down." There was a long pause on the line. "That's a significant financial commitment, Ms. Ashworth. So was accusing me of assault in front of 40 strangers because I was wearing a hoodie," Nia said. "I think we'll manage." Deborah Whitfield was terminated for cause 11 days later, following an internal investigation that produced, among other things, 3 prior complaints from other passengers over the preceding 4 years. Complaints that had each been quietly closed with no action taken, because no single one of them, on its own, had cost the company anything. It took Nia Ashworth, in a hoodie at Gate F9, to finally make the pattern visible enough that it couldn't be filed away again. Andre Poole, the gate supervisor who had refused to back Deborah's story even under pressure, was promoted to regional operations director 4 months later. Tyler Combs, the young gate agent, received a personal note from Nia thanking him for telling the truth twice, when it would have been easier to say nothing the second time. Louise Marsh, the retired schoolteacher who spoke up first, received a handwritten letter and tucked inside it a first-class ticket to anywhere Coastal Skyways flew for the rest of her life. She used the first one to visit her granddaughter in Seattle, and she kept the letter framed on her hallway wall, right next to her retirement photo from Benjamin E. Mays High School. Kyle Bannerman's video, ironically the thing he'd filmed hoping to catch a viral meltdown, became instead the primary evidence in Deborah's termination, and a viral lesson in something else entirely. His firm, embarrassed by his gleeful narration in the footage, quietly moved him off client-facing accounts. Filming a Deborah became, for a strange while, shorthand in Atlanta corporate circles for standing by and enjoying someone else's cruelty instead of stopping it. 3 years later, Coastal Skyways posted the highest customer satisfaction scores of any regional carrier in the Southeast, a fact the company's new head of culture and training, hired directly out of Meridian's own people division, cited in every earnings call without fail. Deborah Whitfield, for her part, was last known to be working retail at a mall outside Marietta, having been turned down by 4 other airlines once the footage from Gate F9 resurfaced during background checks. She never once, in any statement she gave afterward, used the word sorry. Nia Ashworth, 78, dark-skinned, sharp-eyed, still living in that same East Point house, now flies first class exactly once a year, every October, for her birthday, on a ticket her granddaughter buys her personally, in a program named after her, on an airline that had to be forced, dollar by dollar, into learning what Odessa had known for free her entire life. That dignity is not something you get to decide someone else doesn't have. If this story moved you, not because of the money, but because you recognize someone in it, maybe yourself, maybe someone you watch stay silent when they shouldn't have a hit like, so it reaches the person who needs to hear it tonight. Share it with someone who's ever been told, without words, that they didn't belong somewhere they had every right to be. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been in that boarding line and which side of it were you standing on? I read every single one.